Explorers, welcome back to the Starfield Lorecast. This is your host, Tom, with my other host, Dave. We're both here piloting the Starship Lorecast across the galaxy. And Dave, today we are discussing what I would consider one of the biggest mysteries in Starfield.
It's the mystery I'm most interested in when it comes to no, I don't need to know how you get 100 half-eaten sandwiches on your ship. I don't need to know any of that. I'm just
I was thinking like starboard stuff, but okay.
No,
sandwich collecting.
No.
Sure.
No, that's like second to what is and what do we know about House Veyron.
Yes, so that's what we're talking about, House Veyron. And this is a topic that obviously comes up in the games, but it is one of the least explored groups, I guess you could say, in the game so far, because you clearly meet some people from House Veyron. They show up, people talk about them. There's history about what they did and why they're kind of on the outs, and people are suspicious about them. But we don't get a whole lot of a real deep dive. In fact, we only get kind of hints as to maybe even where they're even located in the galaxy. So this is going to be fun. We're going to dig into everything we know. And then, of course, we're going to speculate about some of the things that we might not know. And we've got some fun little extra little bits here towards the end of the show. So don't miss those. But Dave, where do we start when it comes to House Veyron?
So I've kind of broken it up, and I'm going to talk about their formation. So we had talked about the colony ships in a previous episode. Well, it turns out that colony ships are actually even being built from New Atlantis, and we're getting sent out into other systems to go colonize. So in 2190, there was a colony ship that launched, and then after a little while, they just decided that they didn't hear anything from them. They didn't hear back from what they were doing, so they just considered it a lost cause. Right.
So 2190, clearly that's significant time in our future, but the current time in Starfield, if I recall correctly, is 2330. So this was 140 years in the past from the events of the game that as we're playing right now. So it's almost halfway between today's date and the actual future of Starfield. So this is fairly far in the past when it comes to the current events.
Yeah, it definitely is. Those people went on to effectively have some experiences, I would say. So it was documented that during one of their grav jumps, there was a passenger named Janand Veyron, and he experienced a vision where he lost significant amounts of time and met a celestial entity known as the Great Serpent.
The Great Serpent. So this sounds like Aliens. Did I do that right? Like the Aliens guy from
Aliens.
Hey, you gotta put your hands out to the side. Aliens. Oh, my hair's not standing up. I'm making my hair taller. Aliens. There we go.
Aliens. There you go. Perfect.
Yeah. So he met a great serpent in the stars who stole time from him. Is this what happened?
Yeah, he had a vision and he communicated some things to him. The Great Serpent effectively said, I'm the one that made the Milky Way galaxy, and after I was done making that, I went to sleep. Now I've been sleeping for thousands and a millennia of years, but my time is coming when I will reawaken. And when I reawaken, anyone who is a devout loyalist to me will be spared, but the non-believers will be eaten by me.
Sweet. When studying things like philosophy and religious studies, which is my actual background, one of the things we discuss is the bow tie god, and how this is just an analogy for the idea that you could posit any potential gods and you could have one. Why not have a bow tie god? And in order to have salvation or live after death or whatever the promise is, you have to wear a bow tie. And if nobody knows about that and they don't wear bow ties, then they just miss out. So this is kind of a similar thing, right? Like there's a great serpent that created the galaxy or whatever, and they're going to come back. And if you worship a great serpent, then you're going to be saved. But everybody else, too bad.
And there's not, I mean, even going through this, there's not a lot of like religious material Like, it's not like these people have like I mean, as far as we know in the game, there's not like these people have a Bible. There's some contraband that you can get in the game, which are these like Vavroon manuscripts or teachings or, you know, what have you, but you can't read them. So I imagine that there's like some extrapolation on this thought somewhere. But as far as like, you know, in the religions, it's all about like humans connecting with deities, and you go from like, okay, this is what I had on this experience with this deity, right, and that caused me to do X. And so this is the only one that we really know about the Great Serpent and the religion that House Va'ruun falls into is their grav jumping snake boy deity.
But it kind of makes sense because there's a lot about them we don't know. And we'll get into that as this episode goes on. But we and most of the galaxy, even if they have a religious document where they've put together all the writings of Jinan Va'ruun or any of that stuff, we don't have access to that because they're very secretive. We meet very few characters in our exploration, and most of them are hostile when we do come across them. So I guess it makes sense that we wouldn't know that much about them beyond some of the iconography, like the serpent heads and the stylistic details of their spacesuits and their ships and those kinds of things. So what happens next? What happens after this whole experience?
So I'm assuming at some time they find a place to settle, but from the United Colonies perspective, or the settled systems perspective, they spend 40 years before they make contact back with the settled systems. And when they do, they're like, hey, here we are. We're the House Va'ruun. This is an official thing. We're also that lost colony ship. That was us. That's what happened to us, is now we're all getting good with the snake boy. Everything's going great over here in Slithertown. Just announcing our official presence within the great Serpentine galaxy.
Right. Hey, we're still out here somewhere. We found a place to live. We're not going to tell you where that is because it's a secret for only snake lovers like us. So we find out, like, what is this, 2230? 40 years later, they're actually an established group. They've got a colony. They have this whole ideology, a whole theocratic governmental system that I guess is initiated by Jinan Va'ruun, right? He's the guy who sets that up, which makes sense. You're the guy who has the religious thing happen to him, and then he's the one who sets up the theocratic system, which obviously puts him at the top. So, some extra benefits out of that, I guess.
They go on to say that the actual like planetary location, there's a name for it called Va'ruun Kai. That is the like system in which it is, like the planet is Va'ruun Kai, but their capital is called Darza. But nobody knows where that is. Yeah,
there's speculation because you go on some quests in the Serpentis system, I believe is the way that's pronounced, and you come across people from House Va'ruun in ships, and it's one of those things that you have to do. Like if you go into that system, you will engage with this event that occurs. And there is some speculation that it might be the planet Serpentis 4 in that system, which would have the capital of Dazra. But according to everybody who's explored it and my experiences and anybody else, you don't come across anything. You go to the planet. It's not like there's a label. Oh, here's the city. Here's Dazra, the capital. It's not on there. And people who have explored all over the planet haven't come across it. So either that's not the case, or if that is the case and that is their home planet, then it's either not in the game yet, or it just hasn't been found, or maybe it's underground. Maybe there's some remote location in a cave somewhere on the planet that unless you land in exactly the right spot, because this whole freaking planet, you're not going to come across it. So this is one of those mysteries I think we'll probably learn more about in a future DLC, because this is clearly a focus for where they might go in the future with extra content. So
yeah, I think you're definitely right about that, because there's too many good loose ends.
Yeah,
and we know they're making DLC. So there's too many good ones that they've kind of left open, especially with House Va'ruun.
Yeah. So they have a flagship also?
Yeah, they have a flagship. So they use this flagship called the Mourning, which I guess they're mourning for all the people that are going to get eaten by the serpent. That's not them.
Yeah, it's Mourning, not Morning.
Yeah,
So,
it's not like
sadness.
good morning. It's we're gonna cry about it kind of situation. They use that as a flagship, and that's kind of like their official. That's the official party bus for the Snake Boys. They are flying throughout the galaxy and making friends along the way, trying to spread their many different kinds of slithers that they can do.
Do you suppose if Samuel L. Jackson was on The Morning, he would complain about too many snakes?
There would be. I think that's the sequel. I think they're going to make a sequel, and that's going to be the Starfield movie. Is
snakes on a ship? Snakes on a spaceship.
By House Va'Run, yeah. Snakes on a spaceship.
Too many damn snakes on this damn spaceship. Yeah. Okay. But this isn't all that has happened, right? They actually had a crusade because they didn't just go off to this other planet somewhere like, we're cool, everybody. We're just going to worship our big snake in the sky and we're just going to do our own thing. Instead, they decided that they were going to lash out against unbelievers across the settled systems. This is in 2240. Probably not the best idea because, I don't know, they're going up against some like established other groups at this point.
Yeah, groups that have been way more established than they are. But it's funny to say 10 years after they say, hey, everybody, we're here. It's us, House Va'Run. 10 years later, they're like, all right, now we're going to kill all of you.
Yeah. So this is before the conflict between the UC and the Freestar. This is 2240. And they decide that they're just going to exterminate anybody who doesn't believe what they believe, which has never happened historically in the history of humanity. Oh, wait, it happens all the time.
Right.
Cool.
But here's the thing. And here's where I come back to what we know about the teachings. Let's look at the teachings. I'm not sure if this is even a correct crusade, because here's the thing. The serpent's already going to eat the non-believers. Right.
They don't need to kill the non-believers. Serpent's going to do it for them. Also, it's not like they're crusading to take back their holy place, which was left on one of these other planets. They don't have that. That's if they have a holy place, it's probably where they are currently. Yeah, kind of weird.
I feel like if they kill a bunch of people, they're just going to deprive the snake of food. And at that point, I'm like, well, guys, doesn't it make sense to have some people for the snake to eat,
Yeah. All right, so what actually happens in this conflict? They attack some targets, right?
So they do a lot of mini skirmishes across the galaxy, but the one main one that they talk about is actually in the Wolf system, which you go to the space station a lot. It's called the Den. Well, there was previously a space station there called the Old Den, which is a big shipyard for the UC, and they completely destroyed it. So they destroyed the Old Den.
Sometimes you've got to just get rid of your old den and make a new den. You just got to.
I'm surprised they didn't name it New Den because, they're all about New Atlantis and no.
Well, wouldn't it be New Old Den? Wouldn't it was called Old. The name was actually Old Den. It's not like the new den was established and so then they changed the name of the old one, right? The actual name was Old Den, so it would be New Old Den, which would be amazing. But
I mean, that would be amazing. That would be some great bureaucratical nonsense for the UC to do. I feel like that's the kind of stuff. In fact, doing some of the research for this, it was always so funny because I just happened to have Sam Coe in my party when I was going to the museum because I was like, oh, I want to look at this stuff. And he's just walking around all the exhibits. I'm looking at the House Va'Run stuff and he's like, all this stuff is a bunch of lies and bullshit. And I'm like, you know what? You probably do think that. All this UC propaganda. It's yeah, this is all just revisionist history on what actually happens. It's a good reminder that museum isn't actually 100% correct in a lot of the ways that they view or frame things.
Yeah, it's the UC's perspective on everything, which makes sense. So the UC rebuilds, calls it the Den, just drops the old, and then. What is this, 23 years later, 2263, Jinan, which I feel like we're mispronouncing that. Jinan, maybe? I feel like
I don't know.
Jinan Va'Run.
Va'Run.
I feel like it's almost French or something. Jinan Va'Run. Jinan. Je m'appelle Jinan Va'Run.
House Va'Run was snakes the whole time.
The serpents in the sky. So poor old Jinan, who's lord of basically House Va'Run at this point, dies. He's dead, and I don't know if we know the reason. We just know that he passed away for some reason. And so the lordship, I don't even know if he's called an emperor or a king or a lord or whatever, theocratic pope of House Varun.
Yeah, he probably has some designation like the Pope has. Like if we think about like theocracies, like they all have, like I think Iran is a theocratic country and they have their I think it's Ayatollah,
right?
The official name for that.
Yeah,
they probably have some official name for whoever the theocratic leader is.
Right. So it passes on to his son. So it's not, there's nobody voting. It's just, well, you're the next in line, so you get it. And his son's name is Jarek Verun. Jarek. You got it in the back of the throat. You got it. It's way back here. Jarek Verun. It's getting worse as I go.
Something.
All right, so
you're speaking parcel tongue now.
Oh no! Well, it makes sense. They're snakes. All right, so he gets in charge, and then he's like, whoa, okay, we're done. We're not going to fight anybody anymore. We're out. Like everything just like turns on a dime. Is that how that works?
Yeah, that seems to be the case. And their targets weren't necessarily like the UC or the Freestar Collective. It was just like everyone, even people that weren't even affiliated with any of these colonies. It was just anyone who wasn't House Faerun was getting targeted by them. So he decided that he was going to kind of end this and set up some diplomatic ties with the UC and Freestar Collective. So I think the first thing he did was start that embassy, which you go to in the game. He decides that he's like, okay, we're going to just build an embassy on New Atlantis and have that be there.
Yeah.
And
whoops. We killed thousands of your people, but no hard feelings, anyone? Here, we'll put an embassy here. You can find out more about us and how we're not really that bad.
I mean, hey, look at Japan.
I mean, I guess it kind of worked for Japan. Like that Japan's one of those weird stories, like enemy of the Allies in World War II in the 1940s. And then 40 years later, by the 1980s, they were like everybody's favorite manufacturer of electronics.
Yeah, things can change very quickly in geopolitics, I think. What do you call geopolitics, but in space? Do you call those
astropolitics?
Whoa.
Nailed
Astropolitics.
Nailed it. All right. So the embassy is formed and then time goes by. We get like another few decades. And then now we're in our own experience, right? And we're meeting people, talking to them.
The other piece of information is at the end of the Colony Wars, the Freestar Collective and UC, have done a bunch of killing. And so in order to sign this armistice, they get the House Varun in there as well. And they're like, okay, we're all going to agree that we're not going to do, pretty much a Geneva Pact of no use of this, Xeno warfare or giant mechs or any of that stuff. We're not going to be doing that anymore.
Right.
So
everybody play nice
as well.
Cool. Everybody's nice. Everybody's good. So what's the current state of House Varun?
So it's interesting. There's some information out there, like the current leader is the third leader, and her name is Anasako Varun. I think it's a woman.
Anasco. If it was French, it would be Anas. I can't even say that in French. I don't even know. Anasco. I think is that Anasko. Okay.
Yes. The other piece is that the House Varun has pretty much mysteriously disappeared. Very few of the actual like core House Varun members are anywhere to be found. As you go through the main quest, you find the ambassador, but he is like alone in this facility, and he is the only one there.
Right. And then
the House Varun.
And then Andreja, who we find out was raised House Varun. And as you get to know her better, she reveals a little bit more about her background. But of course, she feels like an outsider. She feels like people are suspicious about her for good reason. But then she's like, no, I'm really not. I'm not here because I hate everybody. I'm here because I want to be part of this group that's exploring things and all of that. So it puts kind of a human face on this very mysterious group.
She's like a House Varun on their Rumspringa, like how the Amish have like the Rumspringa where you send out your, they turn 16 or whatever. And you're like, all right, go out in the world.
Go see how terrible the world is. So you come back to us. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So they've mysteriously disappeared. As we talked about, Andreja, there's actual agents. She is one of them that are sent out from their homeworld and are put in contact with a handler. And they don't have any information on like the jump coordinates to their planet or where their planet actually is. They're kind of just like sent out to get information or resources that they couldn't acquire by themselves. And then they bring that back into the fold in some form or fashion. There is a splinter group of the House of Varun, which are called the House of Varun Zealots. From what I can tell, is they're still continuing the Serpent Crusade, as in they are hostile to everyone who is not House Varun. And those are the common Varun enemies you run into in the game. But they are shunned by the official House Varun, so they are not a part of that. They are their own thing.
Right.
They're hardcore.
They believe that they're in the right for maintaining the crusade because, they stay to the old ways and the true path and that kind of thing. But the majority of House Varun at this point is like, no. We signed a peace agreement. We're going to go do our own thing separate from everybody else. Let's not mess with other people. So interesting. I'm sure that's going to play into the whole interpolitics of this group as we learn more about them. Anything else? Because I know we've got some questions and we've got some fun little extra details to get to after the mid break.
I think that about covers it for generalness.
All right.
This is the whole snake. This is the python. I'm trying to think of a good snake analogy. I'm not coming up with one.
This is the body of the snake.
I've done all that anacondu.
All right. Well, we'll be back. We're going to go thank our patrons. Man, okay. See you in a minute. Bye. All right, here we are in the middle of the show. This is where we get to thank our patrons. Thank you to everybody who supports us on patreon.com/Starfield Lorecast. You can get ad-free episodes. You can get t-shirts and stickers. You can join us for our patron chats at the end of every month. And, you can just make us feel a little bit better about putting some content out there for everybody. But thank you to everybody who supports the show, and shout outs to our Space Lords, Commander Marcus Shepard and Worst Action Hero. Thank you for your support. And thank you to all 14 of our current patrons for being here. And another thing you can do to help us out is leave a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. These go out everywhere, so they are huge help. And Dave, we've got a new one in this week. This is from Dom, 2 M's, Dom199 from the United States, who writes, best podcast except... Did I read this one before?
I don't remember.
Okay. This is by far the best Starfield podcast available. The lore is so well presented and the hosts are awesome. Love this podcast. 5 stars. I don't know what the accept is. Best podcast except. That's the title. I kind of expected, I really love this show. It's real good. Really good details about the lore. But, the one host with the glasses is super annoying.
Maybe we'll find out in the DLC, much like House of Varun,
Maybe we will. But thank you for that 5-star review. I'm not sure what the accept means, but hopefully you like the show enough to leave 5 stars. And so that's great. Thank you to everybody who helps support the show in other ways, like sharing it with your friends and any of that stuff. We really do appreciate it. All right. We're not going to waste any more of your time in the middle of the show. We've got some other details to get to. So let's do that. All right, Dave. So we've got some questions. There are a lot of loose threads here with House Varun. There are a lot of things we don't know. I think the biggest question is what actually happened to Genon Varun. And they're French in my head now. That's my new headcanon. When they met the Great Serpent. What is the Great Serpent? What do you think's going on there?
Yeah, I'm trying to think about celestially and our snakes, our great snakes in the sky.
Well, snakes traditionally in ancient cultures were representative of things like comets. So celestial bodies that leave tails and trails, comets and meteorites and things like that.
That's interesting.
But if you're out in the middle of space somewhere, those things don't always look the same way that they would look if you're on Earth seeing the comet nearing your star. So but they could, like, let's say Jinan Verun goes over to the Serpentine system and happens to be there at the same time that a comet is tracing its way around the main star of the system, leaving a big long tail, gets close to the comet, has some sort of visions or something like that. I mean, I think we have three potentials here. There was an actual thing that happened in space. It was all just made up as a way to leverage power, which could happen, or was like tweak. Maybe a mundane thing was turned into a bigger story in order to leverage power, something like that. Or the Great Serpent is just another name for a different starborn that is messing with the future of the galaxy.
I'm trying to think, I'm really trying to think about what the Great Serpent is, and I'm trying to think of like serpents in history, and I'm thinking about like Ouroboros is like the serpent that eats itself, it eats its tail, often called the world serpent, but very representative of time.
Right.
Of
time wrapping around in on itself. Like the end of time leads to the reemergence of new time. And there's similar themes in like Hinduism, where like the god of birth goes on to the god of existence, goes on to the god of death, which prepares for the rebirth of all existence, and you end up with cycles like that. It's a very common thing among many ancient faiths.
And so I'm thinking, if it's described as this being falls asleep at the very beginning of the galaxy, then like what has perpetuated since then has been time. So I'm curious if this is like an end times kind of thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like if this is
sounds like this
is like saying, okay, well, the serpent is just, it's a being that has some sort of connection with time and is like fourth dimensional.
Do you think that could relate to a starborn though? A starborn who has traversed to the beginning of time itself, or has a greater understanding of the unity and how the unity in the multiverse works, and why the unity is there as maybe a gateway to maybe. Okay, so let me go out on a huge limb here. Okay. What if most and maybe I've been watching too much Loki. What if most timelines end in a way that is catastrophic, and some future version of humanity creates the unity as a way to explore multiple timelines in order to find a solution to it's like the Marvel thing about, like, you know, Thanos and Doctor Strange being like, there's one way that we get through this out of like 4 million possibilities or whatever, right? Maybe that has something to do with that, and the Starborn or the original person who built the unity is the Great Serpent, the one who's looking to create the Ouroboros or whatever.
That's my thing. I think, you know, and it's impossible to tell now, but if I had to give a guess on what the Great Serpent is, I think the Great Serpent is probably a deity above, like, is probably the deity that made the artifacts, that made the, you know, but is it a deity, or is it just an advanced alien race, or the future of humanity? If it was there at the beginning of time, if that's like, if that is true, based on what it is, it's got to be something that it can't be an alien, because it was there at the beginning of time. Unless it was able to time travel the same way that you can slip through multi dimensions. Like, what if its ability to navigate like space and time came about in a way where they were able to go back and create the beginning of everything? And so you end up with this weird loop of like, well, how was the universe created? Well, somebody created it. That becomes an Ouroboros, right? Like, it didn't create itself. Somebody from the future went back in time and created it, thus creating the loop. That's actually not a bad idea, because there's a lot of science out there for, like, as the galaxy kind of like separates from itself, like we're slowly, you know, expanding, in the course of the galaxy. Yeah. And we're slowly exploding. Like, that's like the whole idea of the galaxy is like there was an explosion, and the planets and the stars and everything are like, well, space itself, the quote fabric of space itself is not just that the galaxies are moving apart from each other. The space between them is increasing, which is mind blowing to think about. But yeah. And I think they had a theory that, like, eventually, like, and this is even beyond like what we can see, like the end of the world will happen, and this will be like 200 billion years in the future or whatever, that like eventually the gravity and everything will just destabilize and it'll all fall apart. If somebody went back and created a paradox where they created like a galaxy or what have you, then that would explain the Great Serpent waking up, because that would be kind of like an unstableness to it. And they're saying, okay, well, since the Great Serpent made the galaxy, it's destined to end with the Great Serpent itself.
What if the Great Serpent is a descendant of Genon Varun, and the Great Serpent has come back in time to notify Genon Varun that he will be the great grandfather or whatever of the person who eventually becomes the Great Serpent, who initiates the salvation of the galaxy and the renewal of everything, or something like that.
That's very interesting. That's very Dune-ish. Feels very Dune-ish to me.
Yeah, but that's
not a bad idea.
This game series pulls from a lot of different IP. It pulls from a lot of fantasy and sci-fi and all sorts of things. So
yeah,
maybe something like that. Motionless in chat says, I think it's a big alien ship. Some dialogue in the game says that it's a celestial being. Yeah, and that's the thing, is that I think we're in the midst of unreliable narrators. I think that's where we are. So anything that they say it is probably not literally true. It's probably figuratively true in some way. And the idea that some future descendant had the technology, have some big ship that could help travel through time or something like that, could make sense. So I think these are all pieces of the puzzle. That's where I'm getting at. So any other thoughts on this one, or should we move to some of the fun little trivia facts we got?
Let's go somewhere a little more fun.
All right.
Let's do some fun.
So here's some fun details about House Varun. From a meta perspective, Emil Pagliarulo, I can't say his name very well.
I tried that name, and it doesn't happen for me.
Yeah, he's one of the developers. He's one of the main developers on Starfield. He's shown up in some of the videos and things. You'll recognize his face if he pops up on the screen. He has the House Varun logo tattooed on his wrist. So as one of the game designers, either he felt like this was an important enough group to get a tattoo of, or maybe it was his idea. Maybe this was a brainchild of Emil, which is cool. So neat little detail there. This is the part where the Serpentis 4 details comes from. They players have data mined the files, and according to the data mined files, which, just so you understand, may or may not be accurate. These may be ideas that they were playing with that they shot down, or just early versions of something, or this might actually point to something else. But from those game files, it indicates that the Varun Kai is the planet Serpentis 4 in the Serpentis system. And the current version of the game, Serpentis 4, does not bear any trace of the city or any other indication that this is Varun's homeworld. So, like I noted earlier, does that mean that we just haven't had an update to the game that includes that? Or was maybe Serpentis 4 was an early version of that? Then at some point in development, they took the stuff they were working on, moved that into a different system, and turned it into just kind of the plain planet that it is now. We don't really know. We also know, though, that an unused but blank map marker for Dazra also exists in the game files. The file name includes the location as one of the major cities in the game. So this leads to other questions. Are we eventually going to end up there in a DLC? Probably. Was this one of those locations they originally thought was going to make it into the base release version of the game and decided to push it into a DLC or something like that? We don't know. Is this something that they changed last minute, or again, was this something that they were working on always as part of the extended release schedule and they kind of got a jump on it, and so now there are just these like little pieces left over? We don't really know, but it's exciting because a lot of what that says to me is that we will learn more about House Varun in the future. Probably you don't have to wait too long. I would guess if you look at Bethesda's release schedule for DLCs, usually in about the first year or so, we get the first DLC drop from a major Bethesda game. That's usually how that works, right?
Yeah. And I think they have the name of the first DLC ready to go. I think it's called like Shattered Dimensions or something like that. It's like Shattered
Starfield.
something.
Yeah, Starfield DLC name.
Shattered
space, which might mean that something blows apart existence in order to create it again. I don't know, something like that.
I think we'll likely get a trailer for that, the Game Awards, which is in a month or so.
Yeah, that'd be great. They're starting to release some new patches in beta on Steam. So if you're playing on PC, you can actually try those out, I believe, if you click through to like allowing beta updates. But there's some notes and things. So they're fixing things in the game. They've been working on a lot of stuff behind the scenes, and they just haven't really messaged a whole lot about it yet. But patches are coming. Some new information hopefully coming for DLC and future content. So that's exciting. But that's what we got about House Faroon so far. If we get more, which we expect we will, we're going to come back around to this topic in the future and hit up on more details that we get. But until then, I guess we're just going to have to wait. Dave, you got other stuff going on before we head out?
Yeah, the Rad Rolls tabletop role-playing game that I do on all podcast services and YouTube is kicking off campaign 2 of our Fallout 2D20 game in a location that we are calling, and I just made up the name for it, the Stormlands. Is the place that we are going. It's an
Isn't
original
that in
Fallout
World
setting.
of Warcraft?
Okay, but I mean, maybe, but maybe it's an original. We can't
Ice and
just
Fire.
Have idea,
no, that's from It's in Westeros. This is like Game of Thrones
fine.
Stuff. The Stormlands.
As long as it's not post-apocalyptic. I thought about calling this the Nucleus, but guess what? There's a freaking nucleus in Far Harbor. So, anyways,
yeah, any name you come up with is going to show up somewhere else. So,
right, nobody has an original thought anymore, and it's fine. It's fine.
Right, unless you just make up new words, you could call it the Starmlands.
But that's not. But nobody's going to understand it.
No, it's a terrible idea.
This is a land that there are storms in.
Yeah, it's terrible idea. I had a D&D campaign where I set people up in the far north, and it was like frozen, and then there were zombies and things. But it wasn't always frozen because it used to be like warm. But then they changed the name, beginning of the name. It became Ice Bake, which doesn't make any sense because you can't bake anything with ice. I thought that was funny, so I kept it.
That's good. I like that. But anyways, that's coming out this week. It should be out tomorrow, November 10th. We start with doing a world building game, and then we get right into it. So go listen to that.
Go look it up on whatever podcast you're listening to this on. And you can also look up the Fallout Lorecast, the Elder Scrolls Lorecast, the Lord of the Rings Lorecast, all the other shows that I do. Lots of fun stuff. Or you can just go to robotsradio.net and check everything out. We've got lots of content from me and Dave and a bunch of other hosts. So lots of fun things to go check out. Thank you for being here. We'll be back next week with another episode. And until then, I guess don't poke the serpent, because maybe it'll bite back. That sounds like a euphemism. All right, we'll see you next time. Bye, everybody.
Thanks for listening to the podcast. We hope that you enjoyed this show.
Did you know that parodies are copyright protected?
Tell a friend and review
on iTunes
or other services.
Dave and Tom excited for Starfield. Let's all speculate and wear no shoes.
Hey, why aren't we wearing any shoes?
Because shoes rhymes with iTunes, and that's the best I could think of.